Right, let's explore this issue further now with Nicole, Fritz, CEO of Freedom Under Law, Allison, Tilley, who is the coordinator at Judges Matter. Thank you so much for your time. Good afternoon to both of you. Allison, I'll begin with you. I'd like to take you back to the moment we saw the article come out, the first one, not the second one, in response to Mavuso Msimang, who's an ANC stalwart. I wonder what were your impressions of it?
Well, I think the sentence that particularly distressed me was one where she spoke about judges in the high echelons of our judicial system being only too happy to lick the spittle of those who falsely claim superiority. And that really is a most remarkable thing to write about our judiciary and our judges. I mean, to say that they, I think she meant to use the term lick spittle, but to say that they are prepared to lick the spit of other people, I mean, I found it very shocking and disturbing.
For you, Nicole, your first impressions of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I share Allison's sense of shock at, the language used, but also enormous concern that a minister who is essentially, served in government and the executive for now, quarter of a century, should have at best such a fundamental misunderstanding of the branches of government and the roles they play. And so to attempt to attribute the ills of that South Africa faces, and no engaged citizen can think that there are not, enormous ills that we face. But to place those ills at the door of the Constitution and the judiciary is to fundamentally misunderstand the role of the judiciary, and in fact to fundamentally misunderstand the role of the arms of government in which she plays and which she serves, the legislature and the executive.
And Nicole, I wonder, because there's been a lot that's been said in the public domain about, yesterday's press briefing by the acting Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Some agree that it was right for him to set the record straight, but others are saying that it should never have happened. In fact, he should have found a better way to deal with it than to come out publicly like this. What do you think?
I mean, my sense is that the criticism there is misplaced. There's no doubt that Acting Chief Justice Zondo's appearance and address yesterday was an extraordinary one. But I think he was signalling how exceptional the attack is and the sources of those attacks. So we're not talking about ordinary South Africans. We're talking about members, serving members of government who are authoring these attacks on the judiciary. And we know it is very unusual for judges to speak out in the way that Acting Chief Justice Zondo did. But I think it is intended to signal the alarm within the judiciary for not only the nature of the types of attacks, but from where they're emanating, so that they are emanating from within sort of the other branches of government, which represents, as I said, at best, a kind of fundamental misunderstanding of the roles, and at worst, a kind of cynical attempt to shift the blame and to make the judiciary essentially the fall guys for the lack of performance in terms of realizing socioeconomic rights on the part of the executive and the legislature.
Allison, does it not, though, as one journalist asked yesterday, does it not put the court or, the judiciary in a very peculiar position where this is not the first time we're seeing attacks on the judiciary? Does it not set a dangerous precedent going forward that they will have to act against each and every single attack in order to avoid being seen as if they're playing politics?
Well, I think judges are in a very difficult position, and I think the previous Chief Justice has dealt with it in his way. From time to time, when allegations have been made about judges, and particularly judges being bribed or corrupted, he has publicly said that if there is any evidence to that effect, people need to come forward, put that evidence to the Judicial Services Commission, and it needs to be tested. And I think this is a similar response. We certainly, I would not expect, and I would hope that judges would not respond to these sorts of really, crude streams of invective. I would really, I would prefer that they take the high road and continue to maintain their independence and to speak through their judgments, which is of course what we normally expect judges to do. But I have to say, it is the role of the Chief Justice to uphold the dignity of the profession and the dignity of other judges, and where invective like this comes from a really senior member of government and a senior member of the ruling party, I think you must expect him to act, or her.
Nicole, I'd like us to listen to just a bit of a conversation that Bishop Clyde Nicholas Ramelain had a little earlier on here on the channel, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on his stance on this particular matter.
If the DCJ had taken a leave from one of his colleagues, perhaps in England, Lord Edward Coke, the Chief Justice of England, who made a poignant point. He made this point and said, so long as a judge keeps silent, his reputation for wisdom and impartiality remains unassailable. Clearly, our Deputy Chief Justice, who's currently the caretaker of our judiciary, has decided to have a political opinion, regardless to what he may protest and say. What he presented to us, which is recorded all over, was no legal argument that he raised. He was engaging in the political space in which a politician articulated her particular perspective, which is acceptable in society under normal circumstances. The judge, the Deputy Chief Justice, in my particular opinion, has put us in a precarious place in regards to a South African society and how we interpret this judiciary, given the fact that it is a known fact that at this point in time in our history, there is an open position for CJ in this country. The DCJ is one of the main contenders for that position. At the same time, we are in an elective conference for the presidency of the ANC, which makes Mr. Ramaphosa a contender. We almost get the sense, and this is my interpretation, that between the two of them, something does not make sense here as it relates to the political interest that both have to enter two spaces, one a second term and the other one the CJ position. That is my stance. And he did not cover himself yesterday in any glory for coming out to give this, in my opinion, political speech, nothing but a political speech. Secondly, he equally equated the entire article to his feelings. My concern is when we deal with feelings, where and how far will we go? And to add to that, he never explained the term insult. He never explained the term critique.
Nicole, your thoughts?
Well, I think that criticism is quite interesting and rich. So we know that Minister Sisulu's initial article, of course, makes the criticism that there's been little transformation within our judiciary, that it simply seeks to emulate sort of our colonialist masters. And here what's been held out as an example to emulate is, in fact, supposedly the example of the Chief Justice of Britain. I would say that even if it were an on-point example, that the fact that this is how the Chief Justice has determined that judges should behave is not necessarily one which is suitable or fitting for the judges of South Africa, of a constitutional democracy such as South Africa. But the second point to make is it's not true. I mean, yes, judges speak through their judgments, but judges also speak through learned engagement. So they give speeches, they write academic articles. The fact is that judges' voices are heard in respect of issues on which they are expert and learned. And the acting Chief Justice certainly is expert and learned as to the place, the sacred place of the judiciary within our constitutional structure, and what attacks, the impact of such attacks are in terms of looking to erode and undermine the public's confidence in the judiciary and the independence thereof. And so I would take issue with that criticism.
Allison, an oath that is taken by a minister when they are sworn in reads, I, so and so, swear or solemnly affirm that I will be faithful to the Republic of South Africa and will obey, respect and uphold the Constitution and all other law of the Republic, etc. It's just part of it. In your understanding, what does upholding the Constitution mean?
That's a very broad question. I think what it doesn't mean is that you can't criticize the Constitution and how it's being implemented and even the decisions of courts. So I think the minister and anybody else is perfectly entitled to have their view on whether or not the Constitution is being transformative, the role it's played in social justice, the potential role it's played in limiting or in some way not requiring social justice to be effected. So I think that's a point that I would immediately concede that she's entitled to her views. What she's not entitled to do, however, is to talk about judges in this way. It's literally offensive. It's both offensive and an offence. And she really shouldn't have done it.
Allison, very briefly, we're out of time. At the back of that, the reason I ask you this question is that this is an oath that the minister would have taken in the over 2 decades that she's been in government. Do you think that, because reading some of what she talks about is there's poverty and all of that, some of the good points that she actually makes that are valid, and even some that are saying, but these points are 21 years too late because this is a constitution she, could have raised questions about back then and not simply 21 years later. Would you agree with that?
Well, there's certainly a political point about whether she's being a hypocrite or not. My point is simply that it is completely unconscionable for her to attack judges in this way.
All right. Thank you so much to you both for your time. I wish we had a bit more time, but thank you for that. And really, this is an issue that is not going away anytime soon, Nicole and Allison. And really, we're going to be looking at various aspects of it, especially because the minister is also consulting her legal team. And we are waiting to see what, what answers then are going to be in the public domain as far as this is concerned. That was Nicole Fritz. She's the CEO of Freedom Under Law. Allison Tilley, the coordinator at Judges Matter.